Today we're going to take out one of these SL headlights and refurbish it. You can already see, if you look closely through the glass, that there's surface rust on the chrome bowl inside, and when you take that out and look at it, you'll probably find a lot more rust behind it. It holds on this plate. It's just one slotted screw that you undo from here. You may have to undo this whole center section as well. This hasn't been put on correctly on this car, so there was actually never any screw in there, but you've got to get that out of the way first. And once you've done that, there are 3 screws holding the light on. There's one here, there's one here, and there's one here. Now whatever you do, don't be turning these 2 Phillips screws in the middle there, because those are the beam adjuster screws. So just 3 on this car, there's slotted screws, 3 slotted screws, 1, 2, 3, and the light should just come out.
The thing to be aware of if you're refurbishing a car, buying one or getting one of these headlights for your car, is that on the earlier SLs, this is from a 1973 SL, the beam adjustment system is different, and it didn't have the vacuum adjustment system on it. So the rest of this video is going to deal with the more complicated sort of later SLs, which have a vacuum tube as well as a beam adjuster screw. But on the earlier SLs, you've basically got 2 beam adjuster screws like this and this, and each one of those, should you need to replace them, costs about £40 from the SL parts shop. So in this video we're going to show you how to actually make up one of those and fix that yourself. To disassemble one of these Mercedes 107 headlights, first thing you need to do is unscrew the 2 adjuster screws here, and if you're very lucky, I have been on this occasion, you'll be able to actually unscrew it. If you're unlucky, which you probably will be, you'll find that this is either already broken, or when you try and undo it, it will shear off and you'll have to get a new one to replace it. In this particular case, I've actually got to drill this fitting out, because in order to get the rubber seal out on this side, I can lift the seal out over here, but on this side, I'm going to have to take that out and drill it out. So let's do that first. Drilled out these bits and managed to get that fitting loose. Start to pry this seal up.
If you're unlucky, somebody will have stuck it down with silicone, making your life difficult.
So I'm going to do that off camera, see if we can get that seal up.
We're going to try and reuse them, and when they come against these metal clips, they'll be rusty, there'll be aluminium oxide in there, so do it very carefully without breaking the seal. Screwdriver, carefully wedge these corners up. The corners on this side are the thinnest part, and if you just pull them, you'll rip the seal.
When the seal comes out of your SL headlight,
It'll probably look something like this, and we're going to clean it with just a wire brush, toothbrush, sponge and water, condition it with just some turtle wax, and it's going to hopefully come out looking like this.
take all of this off. You need to take this bulb out, and it's held in with just one small Phillips screw here. I'm going to take out 2 slotted screws. I've actually loosened these already, this one and this one.
And then if you're very lucky, this bit will actually lift off here. Sometimes this is stuck on here tight as you like with just old aluminium oxide, etc. But on this car, it's actually lifting off relatively easily.
It gets stuck on this corner here. It's only a rubber grommet holding it in. Just use something like a chopstick or something non-abrasive just to lever it out. And once you've done that, the whole of this piece should come out. Once again, if you're extremely lucky, this piece will just lift off, but on some cars this piece is stuck solid, and in actual fact it's not worth trying to get it off, because if you break that, fracture the plastic, I don't even know if you can get that piece separately, but if you can, it'll be very expensive. So if it's stuck on, just leave it on. If it comes off, you can lift it off. Most of the cars I've looked at, these clips that hold in the glass are either completely rusted and missing, or in this kind of state here. You can buy these clips. They're about £5.50 plus VAT from Mercedes, or about £3.95 from the SL part shop. What we're going to do is take them off and chuck them in a bath of evaporust to see if we can save a screwdriver under there. I usually use a watchmaker screwdriver, something small. They should just pop up. Try and do it without breaking the clip, because they are £5 each to replace. the reflector and the seal. This held on by 3 8mm nuts. Just going to get a small socket on those and whiz those off. Once again, take them off carefully. You do not want to crack the plastic on the other side because those reflectors are horribly expensive. This should just come off, but 9 times out of 10 it's stuck solid after years of misuse. So I just put a nut back on there and give it a small tap with a hammer. Same with the other 3, and that usually knocks it loose. Don't tap it so hard that you break the glass on the other side. I'm trying to do that. There's 3 nuts undone. You should be able to just pull that seal back and carefully lever this bit off and pull it out. Once again, it's horribly expensive, so do it carefully. Once you got that off, you can get the seal off. Try not to lose the washers. These clips loose on this side and this loose on this side like this. You've got to remember that it's still held in place by these 3 clips here, which are riveted on. You want to avoid snapping those off because they're very difficult to replace and expensive as well. So often this is kind of stuck in there, not necessarily with glue, but just years of pressure. So you just got to try and get something thin in there and break the seal without chipping the glass. Down that way or sliding it out that way, but eventually it will come out. And oops, you probably have to replace that seal somewhere to glass out where the seal has come out intact. They normally break like that, so you'll have to get another set of seals. This reflector looks in pretty good condition. It's just held on by the 2 screws. We're going to take it off and just make sure there's no rust on the back of it or no moisture trapped in here that will cause it to rust in the future. Buy one of these, they should be nice and shiny like this, but after sitting outside for many years with the sort of built-in moisture traps that this headlight design had, they're likely to end up looking like this. And the first step that we've got to do is get rid of all of this surface aluminium corrosion. We've got the majority of this surface corrosion off. We're going to sit this in a solution of lemon juice and water for a day or 2 and see if we can get rid of all of these little bits that are hard to get with a wire wheel or a hand brush. Wire brush does much of the loose aluminium oxide and corrosion away. And the next thing we're going to do is set this in a bath of lemon juice overnight, and that will hopefully get rid of the remaining aluminium oxide. 24 hours in a solution of lemon juice. In here is just 1 bottle of Jif lemon juice, and you can see that all of the the aluminium oxide has completely gone off those parts. So we just need to wash that down. These slight rusty parts there, I'm just going to dip this in a bath of evaporust as well to get rid of that rust. When you take off your chrome reflector and you see that some of the chrome has perished, like this one here, what you should do, if money was no object, is send it off to a rechroming place, either locally or the SL shop will do this, but it will cost you several £100. When you take your headlight to pieces, you have minor deterioration of the chrome like this. You can just touch that up with some the chrome spray paint. Now this stuff has to go on to a black gloss backing, but if you're actually just spraying over the chrome there, and you don't need to touch, you don't need to sand the rust back or anything else, you can just spray that straight over there. Make sure you obviously mask the rest of the good chrome off. Now whatever you do, do not ever put one of these units in a rust bath. I made that mistake once myself, but whatever's on these headlights will be stripped off with standard Vaporust rust remover or the Frost rust remover that we've been using. If you have more heavily rusted areas like this, the way I restore that would be to use the Evaporust gel, which you can paint on. It's very adhesive, so you'd paint it on just go over that with a wire brush first, and then if there's still rust that you can't get off, you would paint on the evaporust gel, leave it overnight and wash it off. You would then spray over that with some rust encapsulator to stop any rust coming back. And then you would spray over that with some cheap gloss paint, and finally you would spray it with some Bosley chrome spray paint, and that'll come up absolutely perfect. Once you get the reflector lenses and the light lens on there, you would barely know that's been touched up. But whatever you do, don't just dip these chrome pieces or whatever it is that they put on there into rust remover. It will strip off everything.
Okay, if you've had to send your light off for re-chroming, you're going to have taken off all the bits, the rubber bungs, etc. And to put this back together, first of all, you put the rubber bung in, which you can buy separately from Mercedes or SL Parts Shop. And secondly, you're going to squeeze that little fitting in with a pair of pliers like that. Next up is this specialist fitting here. And to get that in, it just goes in at an angle like that and twists up and locks in. After you've put those two fittings in, the next thing to do is to put these two rubber bungs back in. Make sure you get them in the right holes, because there is a spare hole on this side.
Next up, you're going to have to wind this screw back into this fitting, and the way to do it is just line it up and then use these cogs to wind it in. You're going to put the light bulb in, and it fits in one way. When you've got that in, this fitting is going to go on top to secure it, and you're going to twist it like that. So anti-clockwise, sorry, to push it down, and then clockwise to lock it. Don't forget to put this black thing in before you put the light fitting in. It's easy to forget that. Pushing the headlights on your Mercedes, when you take the glass off, the seal between the glass and the actual aluminium casing is almost certainly break and will need to be replaced. You can get them from the SL shop. They're about £14 per seal, so they're quite expensive. Or you can get onto eBay and buy a roll of the stuff for less than £5, which is what I've done. So we're just going to make sure that that actually fits, and then fit the seal and the glass back on. You can get the rubber seals from this company, Rubber Stuff Limited. You'll need 8mm thick by 5mm wide, which they'll have to cut for you. And I paid about £5 a roll. I actually collected it myself, but they'll also send it out. So here are the contact details if you need to get rubber seals for your Mercedes headlights. Get the seal in here and the glass on there. The first thing you need to do is get yourself a pair of pliers and twist these riveted clamps out of the way. Seal in. Once you've got it in as best you can, time to put the glass back on. And that should compress the seal down and make sure it's sitting nicely in its groove. Rest the glass on, obviously, after you've cleaned it. And then we're going to just twist these clips back in and then put the top clips on. That should nicely compress the seal, stop any moisture getting into the light. Once you've got the seal in, the next thing is to twist these clips back around. So you need to push down the glass to compress the seal, and then get something like a the way I do it is get something like a small pair of pliers like this and twist it from the bottom so they click over. Got the 3 clips on the top. The next thing to do is put the indicator lens back on. Now that indicator lens should have 3 little nylon plastic washers that go over there first, and I actually use these things here. Once again, from Westfield Fasteners. You're going to need those anyway to refurbish the beam adjuster screws. So we're going to pop 3 of those. Make sure you put it on properly. For example, that is not on properly, and if you just put that over that, you risk you run the risk of getting moisture in the lamp at a later date. So take your time putting the seal on and just double check, make sure that it's on. The reflector on, put the washers on, and then the nuts on. Make sure that top wash is under the seal. Tightening these up with a socket. Just don't over tighten them. Tighten them just until you feel the first bit of tension, because the rubber seal will keep the moisture out. If you over tighten those, you run the risk of cracking the plastic fitting on the other end. The beam adjuster screw before you put the seal in. Now these beam adjuster screws, when they come out of the cars, are nearly always rusted and useless. So you can either get yourself along to the SL part shop and buy this series of pieces here for a mere £39. I'll just repeat that, £39. Or you can make up your own, which is what I'm going to do. First up, you need a screw. Now these screws are M4 55mm posi pan screws with a Phillips head. Okay, once again, all of these bits come from Westfield fasteners. Then you need a nylon washer. Once again, these nylon washers you're going to use for the reflector bowls anyway. They come from Westfield fasteners again. And there you go, there's the size of them. Next up, you're going to use a rubber grommet. These rubber grommets, you could just get a kit of rubber grommets from Toolstation for £2.37. And you're just going to use the smallest ones in this particular case. Then you've got a washer. Now the washer that came off this car is actually quite usable, but you could also just use the washers which I previously used to restore an SL bumper. Once again, Westfield fasteners. And then you need a spring. Now on this particular light, the spring was still intact. However, you can just make your own spring. All you need is a roll of wire or a paper clip or something like that, and something conical to wrap it round. I actually use, if you happen to have one of these drill bits here, they're perfect because they've got a conical screw and you can just wrap the wire around. You'll end up with a conical spring like that. You can just chop the ends off and that works absolutely. These brass screw fittings usually come off the car intact, so try and save it if you are taking yours to pieces. But if you need to make one, almost impossible to buy separately, but if you need to make one, you can just get an M4 furniture bolt with these cap nuts here from eBay, and we've got some arriving tomorrow. Oops. And you can just drill straight through that to make it hollow and just flatten the end if you need to. It's not really that important. And then you can just chop it off with a hacksaw. On the car is also usually intact because it's brass. I've never had to make up one of those, or indeed the rubber bung that it goes into. You can buy the rubber grommet it comes into from Mercedes. You can buy them for about £5.95 from the SL part shops if you just need another one. Together, first you put the nylon washer on, and then you put the rubber grommet on, and this goes on the outside of the light like so. Screw on, you put your washer on next, then you put your spring on, the big end towards the washer and the small end towards this brass cap, and then you screw that tight. Screw in. Next up, we're going to put this one in before you put the seal in. What usually happens with these vacuum headlamp beam adjusters on the SLs is they rust at the end, and then this brass fitting, which is either soldered or glued on, effectively just falls off, and you end up, the screw ends up rusting inside there. So what we're going to try and do is make our own up. And the first thing we get is some 3mm braided wire shielded with plastic, and we're just going to glue that onto that side. The next thing we've got to do is make up a brass fitting, and to do that, what I do is I use what are called door handle screws, male to female, and I'm just going to use this side here. These things are not particularly cheap. I got them from eBay. They were about £3.69 for 4 of them, and I'm just going to use this part here, and I'm going to cut it down, leaving us with a brass tube with the right M4 screw. I cut it fractionally too long, so this time I'm just going to add a washer, and we're going to pop this in a hole in a piece of wood that I've drilled like this, and down here we've got a hacksaw line already cut, so basically I just need to cut in there, and that will give us a lovely straight cut. To get the other bit out, just screw the end in like that. Now if you need to make up little brass shims because on your car they're missing or worn out on the other side, you would drill a hole through here first, and that there is almost exactly the same size as you need for the brass shim on the other side of the headlamp beam adjuster. Once you've cut the cable to length, you're going to strip off
5mm on each side.
We've glued on the two fittings, one which came from the car and the other one which we made up. We've used JB Weld, which is a 2-part, very strong metal glue, and left that overnight. To get these fitting, you have to actually drill out the old bits of wire from that fitting there. M455 Posipan screws to make the short bolts. The easiest way to do this is just to screw this into a piece of wood and then cut the piece of wood across there. That way you'll get a nice clean cut. Make up the rubber washer. We're just going to take one of the smallest grommets from our Toolstation £2.37 fixing kit and cut it with a sharp Stanley knife. And that will give you 2 rubber washers, one for each light. Okay, here's the order. The short screw has a nylon washer over it and a rubber washer which you just cut. That goes on the outside of the light. Then next you're going to have a slightly larger washer, which I managed to salvage from the car. Then a spring, which that one's actually came out of the car. I'm actually going to replace it with one I've made up. Then a cap that came out of the car, but if you haven't got one of those, you could just go to a hardware shop and buy these special brass cups you can get for picture frames. And then you've got a small washer. Once again, I've used the small washers we use to repair the bumper, which is these ones here. Small rubber washer, push it through, and then put the large washer on the other side. First comes the spring, and then the shim, and then the small washer. The little tight-fitting rubber washer on top of that to stop the whole thing falling out. Next up, put the seal in. Now you've got to remember when you put this seal in that you're going to be threading the indicator lights underneath this seal. Got the seal in. The next thing to do is to get the whole light fitting in, which is a bit tricky. The way I do it is, first of all, to put the flexible shaft in its fitting and through that groove. Next, you've got to thread this indicator bulb under the rubber seal there, and I always start by threading that rubber grommet in first. Make sure the indicator lights are behind this metal post. Indicator bulb under the seal, you need to put this bit on next. If you haven't done it already, make sure that everything here turns freely, and if need be, just put a drop of 3-in-1 oil on. After you've got this plastic bit on, these then sit on top and we can screw it down. Screwing plastic into aluminium, so don't over tighten these screws, otherwise you'll shatter the plastic or cross the threads in the aluminium. The really tricky part, you need to pop that rubber washer off there and try and screw that screw into there without dropping all the washers and bits into the light. Crossing the threads, hopefully, you just need to tighten it up. Last but not least, tighten down this screw here to adjust the beam. It's a good idea to have made a mark how far down the screw that was before you take it off, to give you some kind of rough idea about the beam. And then tighten up the screw that holds in the indicator, and that's it. Job done. You just need to put the light back in the car, and once you've got the glass on there and it's in the car, you won't even be able to tell that you've touched that up with chrome paint.